Hello and welcome again to our series of gems of the Alshich Kodesh. We're looking now at the Seder of Chukas. For those of you who like chapters, that's the Midbar, the book of the Midbar Numbers, and we're actually doing chapter 20, and we're doing verses 7 and 8. The story goes like this, or rather the bit of the story which is the introduction. Miriam died. The Jewish people are on their journeys in the days that we're coming towards the end of this particular chapter of the Jewish people. Miriam dies. As soon as Miriam dies, then the well, the mysterious, miraculous well, that accompanied the Jewish people in their journey throughout their travels from place to place, when they went there, it appeared, so they had enough water to basically give enough, probably a total of something like 3 million people or so, and their cattle enough to drink, no problems. Miriam dies. As soon as she dies, as this miracle happened through her, or rather in her merit, because she was there, because she was present, then it disappeared. That itself, incidentally, is a problem, because why should it disappear? Just because somebody dies doesn't mean we lose a connection with them. We have a Jewish principle that the connections we have with our forefathers, for anything good they have done, can last for millennia. Some people, including myself, say the story of the binding of Isaac in our morning prayers every day, and there's a little prayer we say afterwards that, in the same way as Avram, who was the embodiment of kindness, was willing to close that kindness off to do your commandment to take his son and kill him, which of course didn't actually turn out in the end. And similarly, God, you please overlook anything we did wrong and overcome your sense of justice that would demand retribution. It's sort of a connection to Avram Avinu, who's been dead for a good number of thousands of years. So why, simply because somebody is dead, should it, as it were, interrupt that effect, this positive effect that they have on their offspring through the generations? And the answer is quite simple, as the commentators say there. It's very abrupt. Miriam dies, they bury her, and they move on. They didn't mourn her properly. They certainly mourned Aaron properly. They were devastated by his death. They were totally devastated by the death of Moses, but their sister, Miriam. And remember, as the Rambam says, only 3 people reached the highest possible spiritual level to die, as is designated, to die by the kiss of HaShem. In other words, the soul that you breathe into your body, it was simply taken away again, painless, etc. To die at that level was Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, 3 siblings. But they didn't mourn her properly. If you don't value that connection that you have to the past is disconnected. And the benefits of the past are disconnected as well. So then there's a big problem. The Jewish people are in a desert and they don't have any water. That's where we're going to take up the story. They complain against Moses. Why did you bring us here? Why did you take us out of Egypt, you? And they complain against Aaron as well. Ultimately, of course, they're complaining against God. But the focus is Moshe and Aaron. So here's the verse. And we'll look at it in our art scroll so we can see what we're doing. V'yadaber Hashem al Moshe lemor. And Hashem speaks to Moses and lemor to say. V'yadaber Hashem al Moshe lemor to say. Okay, how does this translate it? And Hashem spoke to Moses saying, if you translate it that way, then you have no problem. But that's, if you forgive me saying, Rabbi Artscroll, that's not the translation, or at least according to the Alshich, it's not. V'yadaber Hashem al Moshe, God spoke to Moses, lemor to say, Kach hasamata, take the stick, Hakel es ha'eda, gather the people, Moshe, and his stick of office, perhaps. Take the people, take the stick, gather the people, Ata Aaron, you and Aaron, your brother, but devartem alasel, and you will speak to the rock, lenehem, in their eyes, or in their sight, be a better translation, but also memov, and the water that's deficient, the water, because we've got nearly 3 million people who are threatened with dying of thirst, and their cattle. There'll be enough water will come from that rock to sate them. But it says, out will come the water, from the rock, Beheshkas as Ada, El Biram, and it'll feed the people and their cattle. What happened? Yikach Moshe Asamasas, he takes the stick, but if Hashem, from in front of God, Kasher Tzivelhu, it was planted, it was the stick actually of Aaron, and it was planted in front of the tabernacle. But you call Moshe of Aaron as a call, and he gathers the whole people in front of the rock. Listen, you rebellious ones. From this rock should I bring you water? Now Rashi here tells us something had happened. You see, they were not obviously convinced about Moshe's leadership. That was the challenge. There's no water. We put our faith in you wrongly. You've let us down. We're going to die of thirst. And so they're challenging Moshe's leadership. HaShem wants to solve that problem, wants to restore their trust in Moshe's leadership. That's what this is all going to do. But something happened. When Moshe comes to the rock, they, according to Rashi, the Hebrew word is litzonim, the scoffers, the cynics, the skeptics, turned around and said, oh yeah, he used to be a shepherd in this very desert for his father-in-law, Israel. He knows where there are wells, etc. This is not a miracle. This is just trickery, sleight of hand. He is a failed leader. He can't do the miracles that we need. He's not for us. So they started making fun of him. No, don't bring it from that rock. Bring it from that. And Rashi says the Hamorim, the teachers, they're pointing with their fingers, saying, this is what you should do with that one. They're making fun of him. Fine. That's the story. So Moshe doesn't speak to the rock. Moshe hits the rock a couple of times. Out comes a little bit of water and eventually enough water. And God's angry with him, and he said, since you didn't believe in me enough to sanctify my name in front of the Jewish people, then you're going to be punished. Of course, ultimately, Moshe doesn't go into the land of Israel as a consequence. That's the big drama here. Now, because we're using the eyes of the Alshich, let's go back and see what it says. So he says, V'yidab Hashem Moshe lemor, and God speaks to Moses to say. Say what? Doesn't say. And then a new instruction, take the stick, El Eda, to the people, you and Aaron, speak to the rock in their sight. In their sight. Now, what was it supposed to speak to the rock? So here's the interesting story here. And for here, I'm going to divert from the Alshich to something called the Supporter. There are 3 levels of miracle, says the Supporter. First level of miracle is somebody is sick, people pray, and the person gets better. You don't see it. It's not, the person gets better. Second level of miracle is not that's called a hidden miracle. The second level of miracle is an open miracle. For example, instead of a well that follows the Jewish people on their journey, suppose it was a river. Whenever the people turned left, the river turned left. Now, that would be miraculous, right? The people travel and turn right, then the river turns right. That doesn't happen. Well, actually, it does happen in nature. Rivers do change their courses, but it usually takes hundreds of years. For a river to change its course instantaneously and in complete lockstep with the travels of the Jewish people, that would be a complete open miracle, but it would be an open miracle that mimics a phenomenon that happens in nature. But there's a third level of miracle, and that level of miracle is a miracle which happens without parallel in nature. To speak to the rock, Moshe and Aaron were supposed to, in fact, to learn Torah, Mishnayos, in front of the rock. That area that was taken up in space by that rock would then become a hole in space. And from that hole in space, water would come gushing out. There is no parallel. This is a miracle, an open miracle, beyond the normal level. Why? Because they doubt your leadership. Hashem says, I want them to see that this comes from you, from your mouth, and they can trust you. I'm going to undo the skepticism of the cynics who said that you are no longer worthy to be a leader. But Moshe doesn't do it. Moshe hits the rock, doesn't speak to the rock. Hitting the rock brings out water. That's only a level 2 miracle. Sometimes rocks are hollow inside and actually contain water. Not enough water to feed or to give 3 million people? Absolutely not. But then it would be simply like our river that changed courses. A natural phenomenon, only exponentially magnified. That's only level number 2. Why don't they do level number 1? So the Alshich says something very intriguing here. The Alshich says, of course, they're not going to do level number 1 because Moshe sees that something has changed between God telling him what to do and actually doing it. So what was he supposed to do? Again, he was supposed to gather the Jewish people in front of the rock. Oh, says the Alshich, in front of the rock? If you gather people in front of a rock, how many people can see it? How big was the camp of the Jewish people? 3 million or so people. Well, the Talmud says 12 square miles. That's a very large area. Well, it'd have to be to accommodate a very large group of people. How is a very large group of people going to see a small a man or two men in front of a rock and it turning into a hole in space. You won't see that. It's too many people. So this, says the Talmud and the Midrashim, is one of the times when a small area contained a very large group of people. Think of Noah and the ark. All the animals somehow miraculously shrunk into that space, or the space expanded internally, depending how you look at it. Or when the Jewish people would stand on Mount Sinai, the Temple Mount on Yom Kippur, they all stood shoulder to shoulder, but when they bowed down, which they had to do, then somehow there was enough space for them. Because the laws of physics are not constrained, a miracle is not constrained by the laws of physics. A small space can contain a lot of people. That's what happens here. The entire 12 miles, the entire 3 or 4, whatever it was, 5 million people, were squeezed into something which is 12 feet by 12 feet. Now they can all see it. So Moshe does what he's told. He comes and he says, right, Jewish people shrink, here's the rock, big miracle, restore your faith in me, just like God said. But then was the outbreak of skepticism and cynicism. Yeah, we know you used to know which rocks. You know that this rock's got a well hidden underneath it, or whatever they wanted to say. They weren't convinced. Now, to mock a Talmud Chacham is considered to be a very, very serious crime in Judaism. The greatest leader of the Jewish people, to mock him, big problem. Moshe's calculation is quite simple. I was told to do the biggest miracle. That's only if they deserved it. There's a connection between you getting a miracle, like Miriam, and having a connection to the person. If you mock the person, if you're disconnecting from the person, if you're belittling the person, Moshe's calculation is that God no longer will do a miracle at the highest level for people who themselves have demonstrated they're not at the highest level. I'll play it safe, I'll hit the rock. That's a second level miracle. And indeed, that's what he does, and that's when water comes out. He doesn't speak, and there's a hole in space full with water coming out of it. He hits a rock and water comes out. Enormous quantities. That's only a level 2 miracle. And God condemns him for that. But what did he do wrong? It seems a reasonable calculation. There is a hierarchy of miracles. If the Jewish people aren't on such a high level, he's not going to get the highest miracle. But it says here in the verse that he hits the rock le'einem, in their eyesight. Oh, they could still see him hitting the rock. They were still shrunk down to that size. God hadn't changed the miracle that he performed in order to shrink the Jewish people to be able to see the miracle, because he wanted the miracle to happen the way it was. There was a miscalculation by Moshe, and HaShem condemns him and criticizes him for it, and there are consequences for it too. There is a flaw in not listening to the greatest rabbis of the generation. There's a flaw sometimes that creeps in, that the greatest rabbi of the generation can make a miscalculation for the best of reasons and not understand exactly what Hashem is doing or wants from him. And as a consequence of that, his leadership becomes diminished, and Moshe Rabbeinu is not able to lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. I wish you all a good Shabbos.